Where the Arabian desert reaches the sea, the wind brings sandstorms to scour the land. But every year there comes a different wind. It whips up the Indian Ocean and transforms land and sea alike. They call it the Kahreef, the wind of plenty. Behind the southern coast of Oman, bare rocky hills look out towards the Indian Ocean. This is the other Arabian desert, not rolling sand dunes, but sun-baked stone. It's a harsh and arid place where water is almost unknown. Once every year, near the coast, the Kahreef arrives to begin the annual transformation of land and sea. Instead of sandstorms, this wind brings mist. In the space of a few days, the dusty ground is covered with fresh grass. Trees put out their leaves and dormant flowering plants begin to form buds. The trees trap the moisture in the breeze. The Kahreef is a warm, damp wind sweeping in from the southwest across the Indian Ocean. The mist condenses on the leaves and twigs of the trees or on the moss on their branches, and from there it drips down to quench the thirsty ground. The local people are quick to bring out their cattle to feed on the fresh grass. From mid-June to mid-September, the Kahreef roars in. It brings new life to the sea as well. The warm water along the shore is swept away to be replaced by cold water, rich in nutrients, welling up from the depths of the Indian Ocean. The algae in the splash zone, above high tide mark, are fed and watered by the spray. In the shallows, the kelp comes to life. Elsewhere on the shores of the Indian Ocean, coral reefs are the norm, but here there's a kelp forest, renewed every year as the cold water comes in. Deeper down, where the water stays cooler all year round, the kelp forest is permanent. The fish which live here are camouflaged to match the mottled brown leaves which surround them. A moray eel foraging among the rocks is a potent force in maintaining that camouflage. Any fish that is too conspicuous will be eaten. Even down here, the riches brought by the Kahreef feed new growth. The stage is set for an explosion of marine life later in the year. As the waves thunder on the rocky shore, the warm wind that drives them reaches the land as clouds of mist and drizzle. There the transformation is complete. Where dust and drought held sway, now everything is green, thanks to the magic of the misty Kahreef. But another transformation is beginning. Its agents are goats, the most destructive of all mankind's domestic animals. The flocks kept here supply milk and meat to their owners and produce some income when they're sold in the towns. They also supply status, and that's where the problem lies. The flocks are bigger than they need to be, and their impact on the vegetation too is unnecessarily hard. As well as grass, goats eat the leaves and young twigs off the bushes. Eventually, they will kill them. At this time of plenty, it's easy to ignore the damage that the goats are doing. The rigors of the dry season are forgotten as welcome drizzle cloaks the hills and awakens the flowers. The drizzle gathers into small streams, many of them only temporary, a phenomenon of the wet season. The streams run together at the bottom of the slopes and gush into waterholes which are dry at the other end of the year. African silverbills sit out the humid middle part of the day over one such short-lived waterhole. They're not the only Africans in the area. The Jabali people came here from Ethiopia hundreds of years ago. They speak their own language, not Arabic. They brought their cattle and goats with them from Africa. The position of camels here in Oman is rather odd. This is where they were first domesticated by the Arabs. Originally, when they were used as beasts of burden, they were fed on the low-lying pastures near the sea. But today the old order has broken down and camels are fed wherever they can be driven, often in the vulnerable forests on the escarpment above. The damage done by a herd of camels is scarcely repaid by their only remaining function, which is boosting the social standing of their owner. Like goats, they will destroy all the vegetation, turning the forest into an extension of the bare mountains which lie behind the fertile coastal strip. Where freshwater streams reach the coast, they create a unique environment known as a core. It's a freshwater lagoon, trapped by the beach which divides it from the sea. The core provides a feeding place for migrant birds of many kinds. Greater flamingos visit from Africa and Iran during their non-breeding season. Herons come here too to take advantage of the short-lived abundance of the core. As autumn arrives, snipe pass through on migration. The Kahreef is nearly over and the season is once more on the turn. The core is shrinking and drying, and time is running out for many of the birds and other animals that use it. The wind is dropping and the sea has calmed down, a warning of the long dry season to come. Big changes are taking place underwater. The kelp is beginning to die as the warmer water returns and the supply of nutrients from the open ocean begins to fail. This time of death is also a time of plenty for animals that can make use of the abundance of plant debris in the water and on the rocks. Abalone, large shellfish, come into their own. So too do the people who make a living fishing for them at this time of year. Abalone are very good to eat and highly saleable in the markets inland. They're regarded as an aphrodisiac, which boosts their price, making abalone fishing a profitable trade. The divers go as deep as 20 meters in search of their prey, without any artificial aids other than goggles and a strong knife. The water is as full of food as it will ever be, and shoals of fish come into shore to share in the feast. The tiny seedlings of next year's forest are already growing. Their growth will be arrested as the water warms up, and they will lie in wait for next year's cold influx when the Kahreef returns. Sea urchins graze on the old kelp as well as on the tiny new plants on the rocks. Brilliant blue and orange damselfish feed round them on the morsels which the sea urchins dislodge. But above all, it's the time of the filter feeders, worms and anemones which spread their fanciful, multicolored tentacles to reap the harvest of detritus floating past them in the clouded water. Not all the colourful fancies are traps for food. Some are for breathing, the gills of a gorgeous array of sea slugs. A giant planarian worm floats over the food supply like a red flag in a breeze. Sea urchins take advantage of the supply of food to spawn, converting the energy from the kelp into eggs and sperm. But a large part of their output will become food for all those filter feeders. The filter feeders are near the bottom of the food chain. As their populations expand, they provide a reliable source of food for small fish, which are preyed on by larger fish, and so on to the top of the chain. As the shoals of small fish gather and grow, they are eagerly awaited on shore as another aspect of the harvest provided by the Kahreef. Dead kelp washed ashore provides food for Sally Lightfoot, the rock crab which is so abundant round tropical and subtropical coasts. They are adapted to hang on whatever the state of the sea, and they'll eat whatever they can lay claws on. Rock skippers are small, highly adapted fish which also forage at the edge of the water, sharing the generous supplies of food at the end of the Kahreef. Cormorants venture into the surf to take their toll of the small inshore fish. The young cormorants quarrel over the catch. This isn't a sign of shortage. Fish are extremely plentiful at this time of year. It's just in the nature of cormorants to pick a fight whenever they can. The shoals of sardines are too abundant for the cormorants to have any effect on their numbers. They are ready for harvest. The harvest is colossal. Using seine nets carried out from the beach, the local people drag in sardines by the ton. The catch along this coast is nearly 100,000 tons a year. They dump the fish unceremoniously on the beach, where they will die and dry in the sun. Autumn has come to the land. Away from the oases, the trees and bushes are drying up and changing color. The sun is pushing the boundary of the desert towards the coast once more, now that the Kahreef is over. Those bushes which have survived the attentions of the goats are dormant, awaiting the return of moisture in the spring. Some plants, like frankincense, rose of the desert, and many acacias, flower at this time of the year in a most unexpected strategy. Though it seems strange, it works very well. Now that the land has dried, these flowers represent the only source of moisture for pollinating insects away from the permanent oases. Where other flowers go in for seductive scents and sugary nectar, these have only to produce water to bring the pollinators buzzing round their petals. Not long ago, this whole area was densely forested. That was before the cattle became so numerous. Some parts of the forest survive, but others are reduced to dust at this time of year. Where there are a few plants left, the herds are brought in to look for one last bite before the food disappears. Browsing the already leafless bushes, the cows continue the work of the goats. They destroy what little is left of the twigs which would otherwise have provided next year's fodder when the Kahreef returns. The herds of cattle and the flocks of goats are maintained and enlarged by government subsidy, but no subsidy can replace a forest thousands of years old. From the low-lying plains, which were once their province, the camels have been moved up onto the escarpment, and the cattle have encroached downwards from the traditional high-range lands. The result is plain to see. Unexpectedly in the howling wilderness, the magical oases still offer coolness and shade and the priceless gift of water. It last rained heavily and continuously in Oman 5,000 years ago. That was when the last pluvial came to an end. A pluvial in this part of the world was very much like an ice age without the ice. During that rainy period, the whole country must have been covered in streams, pools, and lush vegetation. Then the water drained gradually away until only in a few low-lying spots such as this was there any left. The birds have been coming here ever since. Masked weavers are permanent residents. Each male builds several non-breeding nests during the year, but in the season of the Kahreef, he builds to attract a female to breed while food is plentiful. Kingfishers can live here as well, but hoopoes are migrants. They visit Oman on passage twice a year. The paradise flycatcher, cousin of a common African species, is another resident held here by the annual magic of the rains. The male has a glorious white tail. Humans may have lived here during the pluvial too, but they've only recently had such a severe impact on their environment. Now that camels have lost their original purpose and exist only as status symbols for their truck-driving masters, and domestic herds have grown far beyond the capacity of the land to support them, the time has come to rethink. And in Oman, people are thinking very carefully. No one is short of money to buy the amenities of the 20th century, but no amount of money will change the climate. There must be a way to reconcile a modern way of life with an environment so fragile and complex. The government supplies water pumped from ancient underground aquifers. Most of the water which nature supplies every year in the Kahreef goes to waste, because so many of the trees which used to collect it have gone. So what is to be done? Here's one suggestion: metal trees. The function of the real trees is taken over by wire mesh screens, which trap and drop the moisture in the same way, if less elegantly. The tanks hold enough to supply water to plantations where new trees are being grown, eventually to be planted out in areas which will be protected from grazing and browsing animals. After only a couple of years, the difference between overgrazed and ungrazed land is easy to see. When goats leave them alone, the twigs bear buds ready for the coming of the next Kahreef. Before too long, when the storm clouds gather and the wind gradually gets up in May, the Kahreef will return to a land with trees which will once more be able to make use of the generosity of the bringer of harvest, the wind of plenty.
The Sultanate of Oman lies on the eastern coast of the Arabian Peninsula. It's a relatively small country, about the size of Great Britain, and much of it consists of hot, dry, sandy desert. But this is only part of Oman's landscape, for beyond the desert plains and rolling dunes, there are limestone plateaus and high, cool mountains cloaked in lush woodland. On the open plains, rainfall is seasonal, and large, shallow lakes form that quickly evaporate, leaving the fine clay soil cracked and parched for much of the year. Perennial streams cut their way through the mountains, but few will ever reach the sea. Like its landscape, Oman's wildlife is rich and varied. The Arabian oryx and gazelle were relentlessly hunted in less enlightened days. And almost the entire world population of tahr is confined to the country's high, rocky slopes. Today, much of Oman's wildlife, whether large or small, finds sanctuary within the country's many reserves and parks, established as part of the Sultan's commitment to nature conservation. The Arabian Peninsula forms a land bridge between the continents of Africa and Asia. It also lies on the flight path of many migrant birds as they travel between their breeding grounds and winter quarters. Just off the mainland, in the Gulf of Oman, lie a group of small rocky islands. And it's to these that a large number and variety of seabirds return each year. The shallow waters of the Gulf around the Damaniyat Islands are rich in small fish, especially in the spring. And it's then that large numbers of terns gather to breed. These are bridal terns. They spend most of their year scouring the warmer oceans for fish and small squid. They nest on the ground, usually under the cover of low vegetation or overhanging rocks. Courtship consists of the male parading around his potential mate with his head held low and his wings hung forward. Bridal terns are almost entirely black on top, while their underside is snow white. When flying low over the sea, coloured green with algae, they reflect the water's colour and appear green themselves. White-cheeked terns also breed on the Damaniyat Islands. They're slightly smaller than the bridal terns and mostly grey on top rather than black. They prefer to nest in shallow scrapes in more exposed places, without the shelter of overhanging plants or rocks. Hempricks gull is a familiar sight throughout Oman's coastal waters. It's also known as the sooty gull because of its distinctive dark brown, almost black plumage. Many birds, like the wagtail and turnstone, stop off to feed here along the shore. They're on their way back to as far north as Siberia, having overwintered further south, on the east coast of Africa. An osprey watches over them. It too is on its passage north, but presents no threat to the birds. It feeds entirely on fish. The noddy is an irregular visitor to these waters. It occasionally breeds here too, but only on the smallest of islands or even on sea stacks. The tern chicks are already well grown by the time the noddies settle down to breed in midsummer. To the southeast of Muscat, Oman's capital, the rocky shore is fringed by mangrove trees. The mangroves line creeks, bringing fresh water down to the sea during the rainy season. The trees grow in both brackish and salt water. The young mangroves are submerged and exposed by the tide, providing an ideal nursery for the young of many species of inshore fish. Above the water's surface, the larger mangroves, like any other tree, spread their leaves in the sun. This is a dwarf species of mangrove, rarely exceeding 2 meters in height. Where there are fish, fish-eating birds will not be far away. The Eurasian kingfisher, like many other birds here, is just passing through, taking advantage of the rich source of food in the creeks. It breeds from the Mediterranean to Siberia, and although it lives mainly in fresh water, it's quite happy to fish for saltwater prey while it's on the way to and from its wintering grounds. Many wading birds also stop off here to pick over the rich mud in search of invertebrates. In fact, a whole variety of birds use the mangrove-lined creeks during the spring and autumn. The roller is a regular visitor. Its large size and conspicuous, brightly coloured plumage make it instantly recognisable. It normally feeds on insects that are taken on the ground, in the air, or occasionally from the water's surface. Insects are rare in this habitat. The mangrove's leaves are salty and virtually inedible. But there are plenty of crabs. Like the birds, they feed among the mangrove roots and mud exposed at low tide. Many are brightly coloured, especially the fiddler crabs. The males have one claw that's hugely enlarged and far too big to be of any use for feeding. That's left to its other, normal-sized claw. The crab's eyes are held high on stalks, giving it good all-round vision to watch out for predators and other crabs. Fiddler crabs are very territorial, and the males wave that enormous claw to warn off other males and attract female crabs to their patch. They can even feed and display at the same time. When threatened, they dive into the safety of their burrows and emerge moments later when the danger is past. On the more open mudflats lives another tiny species of crab. Dotilla is also highly territorial and displays with both arms to its neighbours. It feeds on organic detritus in the sand. The pellets are actually the rejected remains of a scoop of sand scraped from the surface using its front claws and then rolled and picked over in search of food. Mangrove ecosystems are among the most productive on Earth, and crabs of all shapes and sizes feed on the mud and exposed roots. On the nearby beach at Kurum, ghost crabs follow the edge of the sea as the tide ebbs. These are shy crabs that never venture far from their burrows and rarely completely submerge themselves in water. The loss of a claw is of no great importance to this one. It can still feed normally, and a new limb will eventually grow in place of the old one. Nearby, it looks as if someone has been busy making sand castles. It's another type of ghost crab. While the tide is out, it's taking the opportunity to clear its burrow of loose sand. But instead of scattering the spoil over the beach, as most crabs do, it piles it up to form a small hillock. Exactly why it should do this is a mystery. It may help other crabs spot each other's territory more easily, or it could be that the crab uses its castle as a lookout post to watch for predators and rival crabs. Whatever the explanation, the crab's handiwork won't last for long. It will be flattened by the returning tide. The skies above the beach are the hunting ground of one of Oman's rarest resident birds of prey. The sooty falcon lives and breeds in isolated pockets of Arabia and neighbouring North and East Africa. This one is nesting on the island of Fahal, just off the coast at Kurum. Its chicks are large and soon will be ready to fly. Until then, they will have to sit it out in the intense heat of their rocky crevice. It's late afternoon, the time of day when the male does most of his hunting, taking small migrant birds in mid-flight. They'll also venture inland in search of food. Oases, like the one at Mazaira, attract a whole host of wildlife. The date palms thrive here because there's permanent water fed by a small river or wadi. The pools provide water for both domestic and wild animals. Their warm, shallow waters are teeming with fish. Freshwater fish are rare in Arabia, hardly surprising when you consider the climate and landscape. In fact, only 9 species are known to exist on the whole of the Arabian Peninsula. Behind the oasis, the Jebel Akhdar, or Green Mountains, rise to a height of around 3,000 meters. Here, there's plenty of vegetation, tapping underground supplies of water. In common with much of this part of the world, annual rainfall here has been declining in recent years, and the trees have to send their roots deeper and deeper into the rocky soil. Among the rocks, there are small pockets of surface water, and like the oases, these act as magnets to the local wildlife. There are fish here too, but the water is warm and poorly oxygenated. There's been no fresh supply coming into the pool for months. The fish have to gasp for air at the surface. There's other aquatic life too. A huge water scorpion dwarfs a young toad. A swarm of hornets visits the pool regularly to drink. They're just a little too large for the toad to tackle. And it's probably learnt by now that the insects have a potent sting. Butterflies take in water and salts from the surrounding mud. The water scorpion breathes through the long tube at the end of its body. It's not related to the true scorpions, but it is an active predator. A hornet is seized in the insect's front pair of legs. It will be dragged underwater to be drowned and eaten. Reptiles, like this large lacertid lizard, live around the waterhole, where there's an ample supply of both water and insects. This large, old male belongs to a species that's unique to this part of Arabia. His missing toes bear witness to the fact that the lizards are territorial and often fight each other to establish dominance. The females and younger males are speckled with pale green spots. Other lizards, like the agama, are common here too. They have a small, rounded, toad-shaped head and are quick to disappear at the first hint of danger. Overhead, an Egyptian vulture rises on updrafts of air formed as the wind hits the cliff face. The birds are resident here, an indication that there must be a reasonable supply of animal carcasses to feed on. The Green Mountains are so named because of their plentiful plant life that's browsed by wild game and domestic stock. The steep terrain means there are plenty of accidental deaths, especially among young, inexperienced animals. This is one of the last strongholds of the Arabian gazelle. Like most of Arabia's large mammals, the gazelle has declined dramatically this century because of overhunting. Those that exist today do so mainly in captivity or within nature reserves like this one at Wadi Serin. An adult gazelle stands at about the same height as a medium-sized dog. Both male and female carry horns. In the females and young, the horns are quite small. In an adult male, they can be very impressive and a useful aid to feeding. The gazelles share the rocky hills and plains with herds of domestic goats. The goats compete with the gazelle for food, and in some areas can be a major problem. Goats browse on just about any edible plant within their reach. As well as leaves, they also eat new shoots and even branches, effectively stopping the tree from growing. They also devour any young seedlings, so there are no new trees coming up to replace the older dying ones. But the goats don't just stop at the branches they can reach from the ground. They're excellent climbers, and virtually every part of the tree is accessible to them one way or another. On the other hand, the goats belong to Bedou tribesmen, once traditional hunters of the Arabian gazelle and other game. They rely totally on their herds of goats and camels, and as long as they thrive, there's no pressure to hunt the wildlife. It's possible that it was here in Oman that the one-humped camel was first domesticated. The species no longer exists as a wild animal, and engravings of camels being used as beasts of burden have been dated to around 2800 BC. Like the goats, the camel is a browser, but doesn't have such a devastating effect on the local vegetation. High up in the Jebel Akhdar, among the sparsely vegetated crags and gullies, lives one of the world's rarest animals. The Arabian tahr is about the size of a small goat, and it's now confined to a few remote localities in Oman. In the 1970s, the entire population was estimated at less than 2,000. It's well adapted to life in precipitous terrain. It has strong hooves and short, muscular legs. Tahr are normally found either singly or in small groups of either a male and female plus kid, or just a female with her offspring. The tahr has a prolonged breeding season, and kids can be born at more or less any time of year. Like the adult, they're sure-footed almost from birth. And the kid stays close to its mother as she moves around the slopes in search of fruits, young shoots and grasses. To the south of the Jebel Akhdar, the terrain is deeply scarred, forming high plateaus separated by deep gullies. One of the plateaus is home to another, even rarer mammal, and the scene of one of the most successful acts of conservation in the world. On the Jiddat Plains lives an animal that conservationists the world over think of when Oman is mentioned. The Arabian oryx was hunted to extinction in the wild as recently as 1972, a direct result of the availability of four-wheel drive vehicles and automatic weapons. Fortunately, some 10 years earlier, a number of wild oryx had been caught for captive breeding projects as soon as their plight was becoming recognized. By the early 1980s, the captive population had already reached over 150 animals. Some were reintroduced into fenced areas in Oman. Later, the fences were removed and the animals were allowed to roam free. Since then, Operation Oryx has been a great success. The original group have bred successfully, and since their release, other groups have been set free on the Jiddat al-Harasis. The Arabian oryx is one of the few large mammals that can exist in deserts with sparse vegetation and little water. By its successful reintroduction, Oman has replaced an important missing element in a fragile environment, and so reinforced the stability of the Sultan's sanctuary.